Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Carving It Up Live right here on YouTube and Twitter. I almost said Facebook. We haven't been on Facebook in a while, but we're on YouTube and Twitter. Got a great show for you guys today. All kinds of NBA stuff. We got the trade deadline happened a few hours ago. I've got one team that I think without a question, won the trade deadline. It's going to surprise you, and it's kind of gone under the radar a little bit, but I think it is clear as day. Also, Charles Barkley is out of his mind on this one. He claims James Harden today is the best basketball player on the planet. I will discuss that in depth, as well as why there's many flaws in that argument. Also, see, y'all making me out to be the bad guy now with Mac Jones. I'm sure he's a good kid, but this hype is getting out of control. And I've got something else. I've got new data, if you will, that prove to you he is not going to be a great NFL quarterback like some people are projecting him to be. Also, Draymond Green called himself the greatest defensive player in the history of the NBA. As crazy as that sounds, it's not totally insane. I'm not saying he's the greatest ever, but it is not totally crazy. I'll discuss that later on the show as well. So let's go and start with the trade deadline, which concluded a few hours ago. We had some great deals. We had Aaron Gordon to the Denver Nuggets. We had deals like, obviously, you had Rajon Rondo to the LA Clippers for Lou Williams, who now gets to go back to the Magic City. So that should be interesting to see how that plays out. But certainly Atlanta does get better. But I think there's one team, to me, that won the deadline: the Miami Heat, in trading for Victor Oladipo. Now, certainly Victor Oladipo over the last few years has kind of gone under the radar a little bit, right? He had some injuries in Indiana, his second year there after they got into the playoffs and, heck, almost eliminated the eventual Eastern Conference champion, the Cleveland Cavaliers. I forgot there was more players on that team besides LeBron. But you looked at it and you said, okay, he's not playing that great in Houston, but come on, man. Houston lost 20 straight games before they finally won there. And by the way, I feel good for their head coach, Stephen Silas. He's a great dude. He's a great coach, and wish him the best in Houston. But that basketball team was just all discombobulated and, again, lost 20 straight games. So, and we see this all the time with players, is when they're in a situation like Victor was in Houston, where there is no chance you're making the playoffs. You know that the organization is tanking. That doesn't exactly get you up in the morning and ready to go and ready to play an NBA basketball game in the middle of February or the beginning of March in Minnesota. So I look at it and I say, okay, he goes to Miami. And I told y'all before the season started, I didn't pick the Heat to win the East. I picked the Nets like just about everybody did. But I told you about the Miami Heat. Don't sleep on this team. And they got out, started the season, and they were not playing great. That was in large part because Jimmy Butler was dealing with, COVID and health and safety protocols. He was dealing with injuries, and the Heat were a bad basketball team without him. And I remind you guys that Dwayne Wade's final year in Miami, the year before Jimmy Butler arrived, the Heat were average at best. And some of that, look, I get it. You're sending your greatest player in franchise history off into the sunset, right? You want to honor him, kind of farewell tour. But most of the time with these farewell tours for these great players, almost always these teams never make the playoffs. You see with the Yankees and Derek Jeter, the Yankees were not a good baseball team that year. You look at the Lakers with the late, great Kobe Bryant. The Lakers were terrible that year. They were like the second worst team in the NBA. And then we saw with the Miami Heat a few years back when Dwayne Wade was on his way out the door. It just wasn't, what you'd expect out of a normal Eric Spoelstra-led team. And so they get Jimmy Butler. And I, along with everybody else, is like, okay, yeah, they'll make the playoffs. Jimmy Butler's absolutely an upgrade from an aging Dwayne Wade, but yeah, they'll be the 6th seed and get bounced in the first round, and we won't really talk about them that much. And lo and behold, the Miami Heat sweep the Pacers, and then they move on to the second round, and they upset the 1 seed Milwaukee Bucks in 5 games. It's not like it even went deep. It went 5 games. They were up 3-0. They won the first 3 games of the series and closed them out in 5. And then we go to the Eastern Conference Finals, and they beat a very talented Celtics team in 6. And then we get to the NBA Finals, and Jimmy Butler carries the Heat to 2 wins in Game 3, and especially Game 5, where I think he played like 47 minutes. He got like 30 seconds of of breathing time. I mean, he was just spent. So we look at that, and it was like, oh, come on, man. The Heat were just a bubble team. It was a bubble is the only reason they got to that point. And I said, okay, Milwaukee got better, but not by much. Okay, of course, the Nets are going to be in the picture. I don't know what to make of the 76ers. And of course, we've seen you see what they've become. They're the 1 seed in the East. And then you see the Boston Celtics, who before the season or after last season ended, I'm like, I'm done with Boston. I'm not done with Jason Tatum. I'm definitely not done with Jaylen Brown. But the rest of the team, I'm not. Brad Stevens is a good coach, but man, they've got this thing where they do not want to be aggressive in trades and free agency. And I saw they did trade for Evan Fournier, which is a good deal. But come on, it's not going to put the Celtics over the top in the championship picture. But you added Victor Oladipo to the Miami Heat, a team that's been playing good basketball recently. Of course, they did lose by 30 the other day. But all in all, you have nights like that. It's the NBA. All in all, they've been playing good basketball. I believe they're sitting at the 5 seed today. And I sit and look at it and I say, okay, you got the Brooklyn Nets, who are, without a question, once they get healthy, they are without a doubt the favorites to win the Eastern Conference. You look at Philadelphia. Okay, Philadelphia the other day struggled to put away a Golden State team that was missing Steph Curry. Like they blew I watched the game start to finish. They blew a 24-point lead. We're down by as many as I think 5 or 6. And then, of course, they come back and win the game by 10. But Ben Simmons, the inability to shoot the basketball for Ben Simmons is a problem. And see, Ben Simmons and Giannis have the same issue. They can't shoot. At least Giannis is the most dominant player in the painted area since Shaq. That helps. That's what makes Giannis the superstar he is. That, and he's a great passer, a great defensive player, and a great rebounder. And he carries the Bucks to what they are. And let's get to the Bucks. Well, the Bucks lost to the Heat last year in 5 games. And Giannis was not particularly great. Outside of 1 game, Chris Middleton did not play well. I thought Eric Spoelstra completely outcoached Mike Budenholzer in that series, who I've never been the biggest fan of. I think Eric Spoelstra is one of the 3 or 4 best coaches in the league. I think Mike Budenholzer is kind of the middle of the pack coach. He's okay. He's not going to take you to a championship unless you have multiple superstars. And so I see the Heat today. I say, okay, Tyler Hero and Duncan Robinson, the 2 kids, and Kendrick Nunn, by the way, kind of the young players have not played great this season. But they get to the playoffs next year, and they say, okay, look, we're the defending Eastern Conference champions, for crying out loud. We played well in the bubble last year. Hey, we're not counted on to be that second star anymore. Because, a lot of times throughout the playoffs last year, it was like, okay, it's going to be Jimmy Butler, and who's he going to get help from? Is it going to be Bam? Is it going to be Tyler Hero? Is it going to be Dragic? Is it going to be Duncan Robinson? You didn't know. Now you know. Because I'm telling you, Bam can be up and down. When Bam Adebayo was the best player in the Heat, didn't really go anywhere. He's a good player. He's a borderline all-star. He's a good piece to a team. But I would say if you had to ask me, and I wouldn't prefer to start my franchise with either of the two, but if you had to, hold me to it and say, okay, Victor Oladipo or Bam Adebayo to start your franchise, I'd say, guess I got to go with Oladipo. Because to his credit, a decent but not a championship contending Pacers team back in 2018, Oladipo took the Cavs 7 games. Okay, let's not forget that. This was a LeBron James-led Cavs team. This is before they just totally fell apart in the Eastern Conference and in the Eastern Conference Finals and in the NBA Finals when LeBron was just, literally carrying them on his back. Those role players for Cleveland were not bad in that first round. So let's take that into account, that the closest team to eliminating the Cavaliers in that 2018 postseason run, don't give me Boston, man. That was a bunch of kids. Jason Tatum was like 20. Jaylen Brown, 21. Oladipo at that point was kind of a seasoned veteran. And you had Sabonis, who was a young player at the time. He hadn't made an all-star game. And so now you have Jimmy Butler has that second star. And that brand of basketball that the Miami Heat play, I would not be in the slightest bit shocked if they got to the Eastern Conference Finals. Now, of course, depending on how the playoffs go, do they match up with Brooklyn in the second round? If that's the case, it's close, but I would take the Nets. But if they match up with Philadelphia, if, say, the Miami Heat are able to, go on some kind of run and get to, the 3 seed possibly, maybe the Bucks don't play well down the stretch and the Heat do, and we got a Heat 76ers Eastern Conference semifinals, I don't know, man. I don't know if I would trust Philly in that situation. I'm just saying. So I think they won I think they won the trade deadline just with that move. Because I believe the Heat are championship contenders out of the East. I believe they're third, not Milwaukee. Milwaukee's not the third best team in the East. They're a team who has an unbelievable player in Giannis Antetokounmpo and some nice players, Chris Middleton, like Drew Holiday a lot, and then kind of an average coach. That's why the Heat dismantled the Bucks last year in the playoffs. So now you add Victor Oladipo to it, who has made an All-Star game, okay, who took LeBron James. You know, LeBron had not lost a game, forget series. LeBron had never lost a game in the first round up until 2018 for like 8 or 9 years. Like he had just, sweep, 7 games. That Pacers team gave that Cavs team trouble. And so I'm just saying, if you look at the Miami Heat today, and you look at the team they throughout this season, once Jimmy Butler came back into the lineup, they started to look more and more and more and more like that team that went on a Cinderella-esque run to the NBA Finals in the bubble last fall. So I love the move by the Miami Heat. Now, let me talk about the Clippers for just a second before I get to Charles Barkley and James Harden. I looked at the Clippers, and I'm like, did they go get Kyle Lowry? I would love it if they did. And, of course, we saw Kyle Lowry at the end of the day was not dealt by the Raptors. I read a tweet from Shams Charania that they were saying, hey, look, basically the reason no deal got done is teams are saying, okay, he's going to be a free agent this summer. Is he just going to be like a 3-month kind of rental player, right? Are we just going to have him on our team for a few months and then we're going to let him walk in free agency? So they didn't want to take that risk, and so Kyle Lowry will likely play the final, couple of months as a Toronto Raptor of the season. So I said, okay, if Kyle Lowry is not going to be dealt, the Clippers need a point guard. There's no other way around it. The Clippers need a point guard. Reggie Jackson isn't going to get it done. Patrick Beverley is not going to get it done. Good, decent defensive player, but he's not a pure point guard. We all know that. And then boom, we get the news. Rajon Rondo for Lou Williams. And there was kind of a mixed reaction to it. It's like, hold on, Lou Williams, just last night, by the way, scored his 15,000th point, which is by far the most of any bench player in the history of the NBA. And so people kind of mixed feelings about, like, man, like this dude is the best scorer in basketball off the bench. You look at what he's meant to this team over the last few years. Lou Williams, led the Clippers to 2 wins over the fully loaded Warriors in the first round a couple years back. Like he's a very good basketball player. And, if Lou Williams is your third best player, hey, you got a shot to possibly contend for a title. But I talked about this last week, and I've talked about it throughout the season. Last year, those who've listened to the show for a while know that last year I loved the Clippers. I thought the Clippers would beat the Lakers in probably 6 games, worst case scenario. Clippers would beat the Lakers in 6, get to the finals, and beat whoever they met there. And they choked a 3-1 lead in the second round to the Denver Nuggets. And after that, and hearing the reaction from Clippers players and Doc Rivers getting fired, I'm like, man, I'm done with this team. I don't care. They got Serge Ibaka. I don't care. Ty Lue, I like Ty Lue, but he's not Doc Rivers. I'm done with the Clippers. I'm tired of Paul George giving excuses. Oh, this wasn't a championship or bust season. Yeah, it was. Your owner said it was. The owner said, this is about the Larry O.B. That's what he said when he traded for Paul George and when he signed Kawhi Leonard in free agency. And so what I've said all season, what we saw manifest itself last season, is when you look at the elite teams in basketball, the championship contending teams, what do they all have in common? They got a leader. Lakers, LeBron's a clear leader. You look at the Milwaukee Bucks, don't think they're a championship contender, but if they were to be, Giannis is their leader. Heat, Jimmy Butler is without question their leader. You see certain, by the way, we got a comment right here from William Walla. Thank you, William Walla, for tuning into the show. Do you think the Warriors will acquire Buddy Hield? Well, unfortunately, the trade deadline has passed, William, so I don't think that's going to happen. Like Buddy Hield a lot, though. Really good shooter. Certainly, I think would contribute to that basketball team. But you know me as a Golden State fan, I was thinking possibly the only deal that I was even signing up for was probably a deal for Aaron Gordon, who, of course, we all know was dealt to the Denver Nuggets earlier today. So No, unfortunately, the trade deadline has passed. You're going to have some buyouts here and there. LaMarcus Aldridge is on the market. You see Andre Drummond is on the market. So I see Andre Drummond probably going to the Lakers to be their starting center to replace Marc Gasol. LaMarcus Aldridge, I could see going to the Miami Heat, which, man, if he goes to the Heat, listen, he's not the Portland LaMarcus Aldridge, but yay, listen, he absolutely makes them a better basketball team. But thank you for the question, William. So back to what I was saying about the Clippers. What were they missing? Leadership. Kawhi's not a leader. Okay, even that Raptors team that won the finals in 2019, Kyle Lowry was the leader of that team. I mean, then nobody would question that. That's why a lot of people today, and we saw this morning when we all thought Kyle Lowry was going to get traded. We saw this outpouring of love and support because people in Toronto, man, they love Kyle Lowry, right? Like what he's meant to the city, what he's meant to that franchise. He was the unquestioned team leader. And so I step back and I look at it and I say, who's the leader for the Clippers? It's not Kawhi. It dang sure ain't Paul George. It's not Lou Williams. If it was Montrezl Harrell, okay, the fourth best player in your team, but he's gone. He's with the Lakers. If it was the coach, Doc Rivers, you fired him, and Kawhi and PG got Doc Rivers fired for whatever reason. And so who was going to be that guy? And then boom, Rajon Rondo. Rajon, however you say it. I don't even know how to say it, man. But he comes here, not here, but there, to Los Angeles to play for the Clippers. And I thought about it, and I said, okay, this is a guy, he's got the name Playoff Rondo for a reason. He's not like Paul George. Paul George gave the nickname to himself, Playoff P. And, don't even get me started with Paul George's resume and close-out playoff games. It's atrocious. But they don't call Playoff Rondo for no reason. I mean, he shows up in the postseason. We saw last year for the Lakers, I could make a very strong argument that Rondo was their third best player in the postseason, especially the finals. Yeah, of course, it's LeBron and AD. Those are your two, no doubt, that your best players in the playoffs last year. Rondo was your third best player. Okay, he's distributing. He's having 15 assist games. He shot well in the finals. So, this is a dude that shows up when the money's on the line. And what I think it does, because I hear a lot of people saying, oh, Kawhi Leonard isn't the closer. Lou Williams is. And I'm like, okay, that's kind of a problem. I kind of want my best player to be my closer. I know you have certain instances back in the day with Big Shot Bob, Robert Horry with the Lakers and the Spurs. I get it. But preferably, you'd like your big shot taker and preferably maker to be your best player. Right? I mean, you'd like that to be the case. In Brooklyn, it's Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant's hit a lot of big shots in his career. In LA, it's LeBron. How many clutch shots has LeBron made in his career? He's got 4 buzzer beaters. Okay, so I look at it and I say, okay, if Lou Williams is your guy, I don't want to hear it in clutch situations. If he's your guy in clutch situations, which your best 2 players defer the ball to him, I got a problem with that because Lou Williams is not on the level of Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. He's not. He's a really, really good NBA player, one of the greatest 6 men in the history of the game. Give him his due respect. But he's not Kawhi or Paul George as a basketball player. No, even me who's been very critical of Paul George. Paul George is a much better basketball player than Lou Williams. So to me, it lets those 2 guys off the hook. And so you trade Lou away, and all of a sudden, hey, listen, it's unlikely that in a close playoff game, Ty Lue's going to say, hey, Rondo, you take the last shot. I think everybody's going to be looking at each other on the bench like, I mean, he plays well in the playoffs, but last shot of the game, of a playoff game? Here's what it comes down to. Hey, Kawhi, PG. Ty Lue's going to look at them and say, hey, we don't have Lou Williams anymore. It's up to you. It's up to you. Can you take us home? Can you bring us a championship? That's what we brought you here to do. Kawhi, you did it in Toronto. Okay, Paul George, we know you can't be the best player on a championship contending team. Fine. We'll make you the second best player. Right? That's what they were going at. If our second best player is a multi-time All-Star, right? Heck, was in the MVP discussion with James Harden and Giannis a few years back. Hey, if he's our second best player, okay, here we go. And we got the depth, we've got the bench. Let's go contend for a championship. And of course, we saw last year it all fell apart against the Denver Nuggets, in which they choked a 15-point lead in Game 5, a 19-point lead in Game 6, and a 12-point lead in Game 7, in which they lost by double digits. So I'm just saying, Clippers, I'm going to throw this out there. They have never in their history, this is a team that's in their entire history has never made a conference finals. Forget an NBA finals. Like we talk about the Dallas Cowboys, right? The Cowboys haven't even made an NFC championship game in a quarter century. The Clippers have never made a conference finals ever in their history. Now, a big part of that is because they had one of the worst owners in the history of sports running them for, 40 years before he rightfully got booted for his, racist language. But we see now at the Clippers, they have not ever had a better opportunity to win a championship. LeBron and AD are out. I read a tweet today from Shams Charania, very, very, very trusted NBA source. AD's out for the next 2 weeks at least, and LeBron's out at least the next 4 to 6 weeks. So that's a month and a half for LeBron. That's about what I thought it'd be. About a month and a half possibly. So Lakers are out for a month here. Even when Anthony Davis comes back, they're not as good as the Clippers. If AD's your best player in the Lakers, they're not as good a better basketball team than the LA Clippers. Okay, you look at Utah. Listen, I like Utah. The more I've seen them play, I'm starting to back off a little bit. I love Donovan Mitchell. It's the rest of the team I have questions about. But yeah, the Utah Jazz, okay? You look down the list, you got Portland. Love Dame. Don't know if that team around him can win a championship. Denver, way too inconsistent. Jokic has had an unbelievable season. Jamal Murray has been a massive, massive disappointment, especially from what we saw from him in the playoffs last season in Disney World in the bubble. And so Clippers, for a month and a half, the Lakers are out of the picture. You got an opportunity to obviously get a higher seed than them, but you add Rondo. Now you've got your leader. You got your alpha dog. You've got your guy that's going to get the whole team ready, get the whole squad ready for big playoff games in 2 months. So Kawhi, Paul George, it's on you. Can you take us to the promised land? Could you at least take us to the NBA Finals? Like, this is a talented basketball team. Talent was never my question with this team. I mean, you got Kawhi and you got Paul George, you got Serge Ibaka, you got Rondo, you've got Zubas, who's a good center. He's a better center than what the Lakers got with Marc Gasol. Marc Gasol has been a total disappointment in LA this season. So this is a situation where the Clippers got to say, we've never had a better opportunity to win a championship than this year in our history. Lob City, I don't want to hear about it. That we never listen. Lob City was fun with CP3 and DeAndre Jordan, Blake Griffin. But at the end of the day, we never really took them as seriously as the Spurs or the Thunder or the Warriors, which is really kind of those years. Those three teams we all consider like, okay, yeah, San Antonio is better than the Clippers. The Thunder are better than the Clippers. The Warriors are better than the Clippers. We never thought that team could beat those teams. They never even got to a conference finals. So they've never in their history had a better opportunity to win a championship ever. Lakers are injured. Jazz we don't trust. Portland, Dame doesn't have enough help. Denver's been too inconsistent. And then from there, it's just, okay, you should be able to beat those teams from there. So I'm just saying, this is no excuses now for the Clippers. None. You've got no excuses. I don't want to hear another excuse from any player on this team, unless you got injuries, which Lord knows we all wish don't happen to anybody. Unless there are injuries, no excuses. No excuses for the LA Clippers. Now, let's talk about Charles Barkley, who, listen, Chuck has big opinions. I'd rather you have big opinions that I think are crazy, but you're entertaining, right? You're Inside the NBA is the best pre-halftime and post-game show in sports. The only one I'd put against them is the NFL and Fox, where you got, Strahan, you got Terry Bradshaw and Howie Long and Jay Glazer, like Tony Gonzalez now. Like that's the best pregame show in football. Inside the NBA on TNT is not only the best pregame show in basketball, it's the best pregame show in sports. I mean, those guys are the best. Ernie and Shaq and Kenny and Chuck. I'd rather, if you're Charles Barkley, I'd rather you be interesting, but I completely disagree with you almost all the time on certain opinions like this, than be boring, right? We've seen former players in the past. I'm not going to name any names, but we've seen former players just like, great player, great person, just not cut out for TV. Charles Barkley is made for TV, right? But he said on, I believe it was Get Up. I think he was on ESPN the other day, that their morning show called Get Up. And he said that James Harden is the best player in the NBA. He also said, and I don't think this last part is totally, crazy. He said he's one of the best scorers that I've ever seen. He's up there with Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant. Now, I think James Harden's one of the 5 greatest scorers ever, 100%. I hesitate to say he's the best ever, because consistently, and I'm going to get to this, trust me, in the playoffs, we haven't seen that James Harden that we see in the regular season. But Kevin Durant. But to me, if we're talking about resume, I'm going to give that to somebody like Michael Jordan, Kobe, or Wilt. Or certainly Kareem, the all-time greatest scorer points-wise, in NBA history. And he's held that for what? Almost 40 years? Might have been 40 years by this point, whenever he retired. So I just don't get this. To me, that the greatest, if we're talking greatest pure scorer, can get any shot he wants, and you cannot guard him, it's Kevin Durant. You've heard me say that many times in the show. It's like, he's 7 feet tall, handles the ball like a point guard, obviously can get to the rim as easy as anybody. He's a great free throw shooter, 90% free throw shooter. His fadeaway is money. His step back J is money. His crossover, he can pull from just inside of Steph Curry and Dame Lillard range. I mean, he is a cheat code. I would rather use Kevin Durant on NBA 2K than any player. I mean, like, you can't stop this dude. And I'm not saying you can't stop James Harden, obviously. James is one of the greatest scorers we've ever seen, right? He's a great ball handler. The step back 3 is probably the most unstoppable single scoring move since Kareem's sky hook. He could get to the rim. His floater is money with the left hand. He's a great free throw shooter. But what have we seen? Just the fact that he called James the greatest player in the NBA today is ridiculous. Today, if you said, Bryson, one game for your life out of the superstar players, because we know some guys, I just mentioned Big Shot Bob earlier, like you would take Big Shot Bob over a Karl Malone in a big, or let me think of someone else. Heck, at times Shaq wasn't always the greatest in clutch situations. So out of today's NBA superstars, one game for your life, who you taking over James Harden? And I'd say, okay, off the top of my head, LeBron, Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, Damian Lillard. Let's see. Heck, I'd take Klay Thompson for sure. We see Game 6 Klay, right? He's got when you get nicknames that you don't give yourself, there's a reason for that. Like, they call him Game 6 Klay for a reason. Game 6 against Oklahoma City, where he was amazing. Game 6 against Houston. Game 6, of course, where he tore his ACL. The last game he's played against the Raptors. Klay's great in big games. So that's at least, what did I name? 4 guys? Let's see. Jokic. Jokic has won 3 Game 7s, right? Yeah, he's won 3. He San Antonio in 2019, and then he won back-to-back Game 7s in 2020 against the Utah Jazz and the LA Clippers. So, I mean, how many players today are you taking in a big game, one game for your life, over James Harden? And I just gave you 5 off the top of my head. Jimmy Butler, I'm absolutely taking over James Harden. Okay, that's 6. And we can do this all day. Luka, heck, I'd take Luka's a kid. I would still take Luka over James Harden in a one game for my life. I would take Luka Doncic. Luka's not a better player than James Harden. Don't mistake that for me saying that at all. But let's talk about James Harden. I hate having to do this because I don't want to sound like I'm piling on or being a jerk to these players, because these players, listen, they're the best in the world at what they do. They're the best in the world. But what I got to do on this show is be honest and call it the way I see it. And time again, James Harden does not show up in big games. If you will, let me go back to, if you allow me to, let me go back to 2015, okay? Houston Rockets are playing the Golden State Warriors in the Western Conference Finals. Golden State is up 3-1. Nobody expects Houston to win the series, But they expect James Harden, being the superstar he is. By the way, James came in second to Steph Curry in the MVP voting in 2015. A lot of people believe James should have won it over Steph Curry. I'm not one of those people, but a lot of people believe, hey, James got robbed of the MVP from Steph Curry. Okay, well, you're playing in the playoffs. Show me. So let's go to Game 5. It's a do or die. Your season's on the line. And James Harden commits an NBA playoff record 13 turnovers just by himself. By himself, he had 13 turnovers, and Golden State won that game in advance to the finals, and James Harden's Rockets season came to an end. Let's go to 2 years later. Let's go to a tied series. It's the Western Conference semifinals. The Rockets are playing they're playing the San Antonio Spurs. Again, it's of course it's best of 7 as always. Series tied 2-2. And the game's in San Antonio, Game 5, and Kawhi Leonard gets hurt at the end of regulation. And the game goes to overtime. It's a great basketball game, back and forth. I remember watching it. It goes to overtime. And James is predictably quiet in overtime, doesn't do much. And then it comes down to the final shot of the game. Okay, the Rockets are down 3. And, you need one shot to send it to a second overtime. Keep your team going. And James Harden, they run a pick and roll. James Harden gets a good look at a tying 3, and who blocks him but 39-year-old Manu Ginobili? Now, no disrespect to Manu. One could argue he's the greatest sixth man of all time. But getting blocked by a 39-year-old who's not exactly known for his defense at the end of a playoff game does not look good on your resume. But series isn't over. Spurs are up 3-2, but the series isn't over, right? Game 6 is in Houston, and Kawhi Leonard's out. And Tony Parker had already been out. Tony Parker got hurt in the previous round against the Memphis Grizzlies. And so, James Harden, you're on your home floor, Game 6, do or die, and he shoots 2 for 15 from the field, and the Houston Rockets lose by 39 at home without no Kawhi Leonard for the Spurs, no Tony Parker for the Spurs. This is the same Spurs team that the next round without Kawhi Leonard got swept off the floor by the Golden State Warriors. And they beat this Rockets team led by James Harden, who again was second MVP voting. And I believe James Harden should have won the MVP that year. James Harden and the Rockets lost that game by 39. And James shot 2 for 15 for the field. So let's go to 2018. Now he's got Chris Paul as a sidekick. And it's a Western Conference Finals matchup. Rockets, Warriors. Okay. And we get to a Game 6, and the Rockets have a 3-2 lead, right? They're 1 win away from the NBA Finals. And Chris Paul's out. But Chris Paul got them to that point, right? Chris Paul was the best player on that Rockets team when they won Game 4 at Oracle Arena, and they won Game 5 at home. But unfortunately, he pulled his hamstring in Game 5. But James Harden, who won the MVP that year, that was it. Some people thought LeBron should have won it that year. LeBron was amazing that year in 2017-18. But I think James Harden rightfully won the MVP. And so show us you're the most valuable player in the NBA this season. We go to Game 6 at Oracle Arena. Rockets, again, 1 win away from the finals, and the Rockets have a 17-point lead, and they lose by almost 30. So let's go to Game 7. Still no Chris Paul, but hey, you're on your home floor. Maybe part of the issue in the previous game, you're not playing well. You're playing at Oracle Arena, right? It's a do-or-die game for them. They know they got to force a Game 7. So we got Game 7. Winner advances to the NBA Finals. And the Rockets have a 15-point halftime lead over Golden State and proceed to miss 27 consecutive threes and lose by 9. 24-point turnaround in the second half. And James Harden predictably disappeared. So we go to 2019. And I believe this is the closest James Harden's ever come to winning a championship, or at least even getting to a championship. It's the second round. Once again, they're playing the Golden State Warriors. And he's still got Chris Paul as a sidekick. He's Batman, Chris Paul's Robin. And we go to Game 5. Series is tied 2-2. And it's I remember Golden State came up with, they had hugely. They up by 20 points, and Houston came all the way back, and James Harden's playing well. And they tie the game. And then, they cut it to Golden State is up by 1 point with 2 minutes left in the third quarter. Kevin Durant, one-on-one, takes a dribble on the baseline, swish, knocks down a shot easily, turns around to run back on defense, and bam. He looks down at his calf, and I believe it's an Achilles injury. There's no way that was a calf injury. The way he looked at his calf, that was not a calf injury. Or the way he looked down at his leg, that was not a calf injury. That was an Achilles injury. KD, gone for the game. It's close. And Steph and Klay had not played well in that series at that point. People forget this. Klay and Steph did not play well in the series up until Game 5. And by far the best player for either team in the series, Kevin Durant, who was averaging darn near 40, bam, he's gone for the series. Now, Kevin Durant's gone. This is a huge opportunity for the Rockets to steal Game 5 on the road and possibly close the Warriors out in Game 6. And James Harden disappears in the fourth quarter. I believe in the last 5 minutes, he took like 2 shots. So we go to Game 6. No Kevin Durant for the full 48 minutes. Steph Curry goes scoreless in the first half. And the Rockets lose once again. And James Harden did not play well once again down the stretch. Do we even have to bring up 2020, even last year? Not saying the Rockets should have beaten the Lakers. They shouldn't have. But if you're James Harden, if you are, quote unquote, according to Charles Barkley, the best basketball player on the planet, you can't get beaten 5 games. Come on, man. I mean, everybody thought last season that Houston was a better basketball team than the Miami Heat. And I would say James Harden is absolutely a better player than Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler comes up big in those big games. Jimmy Butler took LeBron James and Anthony Davis 6 games in the NBA Finals. James Harden, after Game 1, and the Rockets blown off the floor in the final 4 games. I hate to say it. Again, I don't want to feel like I'm piling on. But, hey, truth hurts. I mean, we've seen time and time again. That's why I talked about it a couple weeks ago. Or it was last week after the Nets, of course. James Harden's now a Brooklyn Net. It was after the Nets won a big road game. I think it was in New York. They beat the Knicks. And I remember the narrative. It's like, oh, okay, here we go. The Nets need Kevin Durant. It's like, you got to be kidding me right now. You got to be kidding me. We've seen this time and time again from James Harden. They have to have Kevin Durant in order to get to the finals. If they don't, forget it. Forget championship aspirations. I don't care if you got James Harden, Kyrie Irving. You need Kevin Durant to win this to win the Eastern Conference. Because we've seen, again, time and time again from James Harden, doesn't come up big in clutch situations in big games. Kevin Durant does. How many game winners do we remember in the playoffs from Kevin Durant? How many huge shots do we remember from Kevin Durant in the playoffs? How many times do you remember him averaging 40 in the playoffs? So I think that this notion that, and listen, I absolutely mean, I think James Harden is second in the MVP discussion. I think the fact, I'm telling you right now, the fact that nobody's talking about Giannis is darn near criminal. I mean, he is playing out of his mind right now, and nobody's talking about the Bucks, or not the Bucks. Nobody's talking about Giannis as the front runner for MVP. It's Jokic. Great season. He's having a great season. But we look at a Bucks team that is not near as talented as the Brooklyn Nets. Not even close. And they're like, they're a game back. Matter of fact, I think they might be tied when you look at the standings. Brooklyn and Milwaukee. When you look at the standings in the Eastern Conference, yeah, they're tied, and the Bucks have the upper hand as the 2 seed. And nobody thinks the Bucks are as good as the Nets. So this is asinine what Charles Barkley said. So I mean, we gotta be honest about this. So let's talk about Draymond Green, my man. You know what I love about Draymond Green? He doesn't give a crap what anybody thinks. He's almost a little bit like Charles Barkley in that way. Like, he's gonna say something, and you're like, "What are you talking about, Draymond?" But hey, that's why he is where he is. You know, like I said, I got no problem if you got big opinions. None. I mean, listen, if your opinions are, like, just absolutely can easily be proven incorrect, like Charles Barkley that I just mentioned. Like, James Harden is not as good of a basketball player as LeBron, KD, Steph, Giannis, Kawhi Leonard. I mean, come on. So I saw this from Draymond the other day. He was saying, I'm the greatest defensive player in the history of basketball. And, the reaction was like, oh, you're crazy, Draymond. And listen, of course I disagree. I don't want to play this like, oh, I agree with Draymond because I'm a Warriors fan. No, I disagree with Draymond Green. He is not the best he's not the best defensive player in basketball history. But keep this in mind. First of all, Draymond should have 3 Defensive Player of the Year awards. He should have 3. He was a better defensive player than Kawhi Leonard in 2014-15. The following season, 2015-16, he was a better overall defensive player than Kawhi Leonard. Look at the numbers. And, of course, he ended up finally winning in 2016-17. So Draymond should be a 3 consecutive time Defensive Player of the Year, which only a handful of players have accomplished. But let's talk about this for just a moment. The fact that, a lot of people saying Tim Duncan, Hakeem Olajuwon, Kevin Garnett. Of course, they're better rim protectors. They're also 7 feet tall. That's why that's why I think people saying Rudy Gobert without question is a better defensive player than Draymond Green. Are you out of your mind? Rudy Gobert cannot defend a guard. Heck, he can't defend a wing. He's 7 feet tall. Draymond can. Draymond can defend 1 through 5. 1 through 5. You think I'm crazy? Why do you think the Warriors started him at the 5 when they went with their small ball lineups? Back in the day when it was Steph, Clay, Harrison Barnes, Iguodala, Draymond Green. Harrison Barnes was taller than Draymond Green, but they put Draymond at the 5 because they knew he could guard the big man for the other team. And then when it was Steph, Clay, Iguodala, Kevin Durant, and Draymond. Kevin Durant is 7 feet tall, but he can't defend big men like Draymond Green can. So I'm just saying, listen, when people come up with these even players come out with these big opinions and say, I'm this, I'm that, let's just sit back and talk about it, and be consistent. Like, is it crazy? Is Draymond the greatest defensive player of all time? No. You know who I think it is? I think it's Tony Allen. Because you had Kobe Bryant, arguably the greatest scorer ever, Kevin Durant, who I personally believe is the greatest scorer ever. Both guys said without hesitation, Tony Allen is the best defensive player they've ever encountered. And you say, oh, come on, it's back in the 90s and back in the older days, you could, hip check and what game wasn't so soft. And I hear that all the time. And I always say, yeah, there's more skilled players nowadays. The guys at the end of the bench today are better than most players. Of course, save your Jordans, your Scottie Pippens, your Patrick Ewings, your Charles Barkleys, your superstars, your Hakeem Olajuwons. Back in the 90s, the guys at the end of the bench today are more talented than most of the guys back in the 80s and the 90s, skill-wise. So when you hear Kobe and Kevin Durant both said, "Oh yeah, Tony Allen's the best defensive player I've ever encountered." Okay, that to me that automatically means it obviously puts you in the top 5 without question. That's 2 of the greatest scorers ever, 2 of the 3 or 4 greatest scorers in the history of the NBA. And they both say Tony Allen is. That's why I think Tony Allen's the greatest defensive player ever. But if we're talking about overall the whole package, Draymond's in the top 10. He's got to be. He can guard 1 through 5 better than maybe anybody ever. Yeah, but you could certainly put Dennis Rodman above him. I wouldn't have a problem with that. You could put I'm trying to think of certain guys. You could put Jordan above him. But then again, Jordan couldn't guard 5s. Jordan couldn't guard the big man. He couldn't guard Ewing. He couldn't guard Olajuwon. So just keep that stuff in mind. Like it's kind of like when I kind of use the same argument for Draymond Green that I do for Jason Witten with tight ends. Like Jason Witten isn't the greatest tight end ever, but he's 4th in catches. He was one of the greatest blocking tight ends in the history of the NFL. Who do I think is the greatest tight end ever? I think it's Tony Gonzalez. I think it's Tony Gonzalez, probably followed by Gronk. And then where do you got Kellen Winslow. Who am I missing? You got Ditka. You've got Shannon Sharp. I mean, these are great all-time tight ends. And Jason Witten fits somewhere in that top 6 or 7. But if we're talking about the overall package, he's probably the greatest tight end ever. As far as blocking, getting, his route running was, I've seen it up close and personal. This guy's as good of a route runner as there was. That's the reason he played as long as he did at the age he did before he kind of the wheels fell off those last 2 years with the Cowboys and with the Raiders. So it was same with Draymond Green. Rodman was probably the greatest defensive player ever when it came to guarding 1 through 5. But keep in mind also, Rodman, skill-wise, again, I say skill-wise, I think anyone in their right mind would tell you this. Skill-wise, the NBA is better than it's ever been, by far. So Rodman wasn't going against a skilled point guard or a skilled big man. If we're going 1 to 5, that Draymond and defensive players nowadays have had to, or that Tony Allen did when he was with the Memphis Grizzlies. So I just want to throw that out there. Like, Draymond isn't the greatest defensive player ever, but just the whole package and considering the era he plays in should automatically put him in the top 10 without a question. He's undersized and can guard a 5. He's obviously taller than most point guards and can guard point guards. So I mean, we got to be honest with this stuff. And he should have 3 Defensive Player of the Year awards. Don't get me started. He was a better defensive player than Kawhi Leonard those 2 years that Kawhi Leonard won it. Look at the numbers. So just throwing that out there. Now, I hate to do this. I'm about to do with somebody else that I did with James Harden. Mac Jones, former quarterback of Alabama. And I hear this all the time. Okay, Mac Jones is going to be the next. And of course, I understand they're not comparing him literally as far as the greatness of this player I'm about to mention. But I hear, here's the NFL comp for Mac Jones. Tom Brady. Okay. I don't even want to get into that nonsense. So I hear, okay, Mac Jones is going to be it. Mac Jones, I saw that I talked about in the show, an NFL coach, assistant coach was saying, I'd take Mac Jones over Trevor Lawrence, number 1 overall. And I'm like, then you don't deserve a job in the NFL. Okay. I'm firing you on the spot if you believe that. If I'm an owner, I'm like, dude, get out of here. I don't want you handling our draft. Trevor Lawrence, after his freshman year at Clemson, people are like, oh, he'd be the number 1 pick immediately if he came out. Heck, after his senior year in high school, people said he wouldn't be the first overall pick, but he'd be a first-round pick. How many quarterbacks do you hear that about? They're coming out of high school, and people said they'd be a first-round pick out of high school. And after their freshman year, they're like, if he was eligible, he could come out of the draft and be number 1 overall. Over in 2019, it was Kyler Murray. I love Kyler Murray, but I would take Trevor Lawrence over Kyler Murray. 2020, Joe Burrow. Obviously, I was dead wrong on Joe Burrow, but I would still, without a doubt, take Trevor Lawrence over Joe Burrow. And now we have Mac Jones. Now, now we'd take Mac Jones over Trevor Lawrence. And I heard yesterday was Mac Jones Pro Day, and I'm hearing, oh, he's got it. He's got the accuracy. Man, I'd hope he had the accuracy if his receivers are open by 15 yards. Keep in mind, these are the receivers he had at Alabama. Henry Ruggs, who was taken 12th overall last year by the Raiders. Jerry Jeudy, who was taken last year 15th overall by the Denver Broncos. Devontae Smith, who was the Heisman winner, who was awarded the best player in college football. Devontae Smith. He's projected by Mel Kiper to go 7th in the draft. I believe Devontae Smith is the second best receiver to Jamar Chase. Okay, Jamar Chase was phenomenal at LSU. I think he's the best receiver in the draft. Devontae Smith, though, is a close second. Devontae Smith's projected to go 7th overall. And Jalen Waddle is projected by Mel Kiper to go 8th overall. By the way, Najee Harris, the starting running back for Alabama, or former, obviously, he's projected to go 30 overall, so first-round pick. So around Mac Jones, it's first-round receiver, first-round receiver, first-round receiver, first-round, four first-round receivers in the top 15. Then you have Najee Harris, who's going to be a first-round pick. Then you have all these offensive linemen that have been first-round picks or are going to be first-round picks. This is why I was a little hesitant, and I should have listened to myself on Tua. Like, I said, if Tua's healthy, he'll be the best quarterback of the draft. Now, in my defense, I said if he's not healthy, then I believe Justin Herbert will be, and Justin Herbert's proven himself to be just that. But I'm like, man, I know Tua has it all, but he's got the accuracy. He's got a pretty strong arm. He moves okay in the pocket. Maybe he'll work. And it didn't work. It didn't work. That's why I'm skeptical about Justin Fields. I think the kid's crazy talented, but he did play at Ohio State. Like it's the star quarterbacks from the big schools, the Alabamas, the Ohio States, even Baker Mayfield at Oklahoma. If we're judging him based on him being the first overall pick of the draft, he has not lived up to that. He has not lived up to being the first overall pick of the draft. He's been good. He's no question a starter, but he's not the number one pick. He's not that talented. So he hasn't panned out to what people thought he'd be coming out of Oklahoma. Clemson's kind of the rare exception. Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence I would say Trevor Lawrence, Kyle Pitts, and Jamar Chase. Those three guys are my three guarantees they will work in the NFL. They will be star players in the NFL. Trevor Lawrence, I believe, is going to be a superstar. I believe the same for Kyle Pitts, tight end out of Florida. Just God-gifted athletic ability. I think he'll be incredible. But I'm telling you, this Mac Jones hype is getting out of control. Even if he goes, let's say he's a late first-round pick to the New Orleans Saints, I would still start Jameis Winston over him. Because Jameis Winston, what's his problem? Turnovers. I believe Sean Payton, great offensive coach, I believe he can coach that out of him. He's got structure in New Orleans. He's got the talented team around him. Mac Jones, a lot of people believe New England's going to draft him. And if that happens, he'll be an all-time bust. Mac Jones has better receivers at Alabama than he would with New England. Nelson Aguilar is not better than these two guys for Alabama. He might be better than Jalen Waddle. I'm a little skeptical on Jalen Waddle, but I think he'll work. Nelson Aguilar can't catch, man. The man cannot catch the football. Kendrick Bourne didn't ever flash in San Francisco. Didn't ever that's that guy. You could trust him in these big situations, right? That's why they had to trade for Emmanuel Sanders, by the way. That's why the 49ers had to trade for Emmanuel Sanders. To be that kind of that second target for Jimmy Garoppolo to George Kittle. So this hype for Mac Jones is crazy. It's out of control. So let me move on. Final topic of the day, and this actually wasn't going to be a topic on my show until I was looking through my social media feed, and I saw that we got another story with the worst owner in sports, James Dolan. I criticized Jerry Jones on this show. I think he's a great owner. I think Jerry Jones is a great owner. I just think he's a terrible general manager. James Dolan is the worst owner in sports. The man can't get out of his own way. And I always say, look, I don't like to feel sorry for anybody if they don't need to be felt sorry for. For example, I hear, I feel so terrible for Cleveland Browns fans or just Cleveland fans in general. Stop it. Stop it. They're unrealistic. Listen, I'm sure there's great people in Cleveland. This is all fun and games. There are great people in the city of Cleveland, just like there's any city in America. But as a collective fan base with the Indians and with the Browns and with the Cavaliers, oh man, they're unrealistic. And especially when it comes to the Browns. That's their team. The Cleveland Browns is that city's team. And oh my gosh, they think Baker is the second coming. That's why I say, people are like, I feel bad for Tennessee football fans. And I'm like, I'm a Tennessee football fan. I've been to Neyland Stadium. Don't feel sorry for us. We're the reason we're part of the reason that the program is at where it's at. Football, at least the football program. Basketball program's great. But Knicks fans, and this is hard for me because I don't like the Yankees. I don't like the Giants. Could care less about the Jets. Could care less about the Mets. But man, I feel sorry for Knicks fans. I feel bad for Knicks fans because, man, Madison Square Garden in a non-pandemic situation is almost always up there in attendance. And it's not like it's different from Staples Center in this aspect. Like Staples Center in Los Angeles with the Lakers, it's always up there in attendance. But come on, that's most of the people there let's be honest, are not there to watch a basketball game. Even, the lean years with the Lakers, let's just take the year after Kobe retired and the Lakers were still awful. They were still up there in attendance, and not Lakers Nation. The true Lakers fans are great, but yeah, I mean, let's be honest. It's kind of a celebrity meet and greet. I'm just going to go out and say it. New York, that is basketball heaven. I mean, you got Rucker Park, which is the most iconic outdoor basketball court in America. Of course, you got Madison Square Garden, the Mecca. Some of the greatest players in the history of the NBA have had their best games at Madison Square Garden. And that is a loyal fan base. They know their basketball, and boy, do they love their Knicks. And this is a team that hasn't won a title in 50 years. I think it's been 50 years. 1971, I believe, is the last year that the Knicks won an NBA championship. And once again, their owner, James Dolan, can't get out of his own way. And I've talked about James Dolan many times on the show. And we have a Knicks fan last night. They are having fans I think it's about 3,500, 4,000 fans, something like that in New York. And a fan was kicked out of Madison Square Garden. And we see situations where fans are kicked out of arenas like, oh, this guy's over here getting drunk, ruining this hardworking family's experience at the arena. Yeah, kick him out, man. He's ruining it for everybody. Or somebody who's using inappropriate language towards players or towards fans or coaches or anybody. You need to kick that person out. You can't do that. Or someone who's making inappropriate gestures. Guess why this dude got kicked out? I just can't believe it's just so it makes me sick to my stomach. This poor fan got kicked out of Madison Square Garden for wearing a t-shirt that said these words: "Ban Dolan." Not bleep Dolan. Not anything that you would have to blank out on live television. Ban Dolan. That's what the t-shirt said. Not anything just like, oh my God, that's disgusting, man. Kick that guy out. Ban Dolan. And James Dolan got this guy kicked out of the arena. There's a video on social media. You can look it up. It's on the internet right now. You can go look it up where these fans, I think it might have been teenagers. They got their phone out and James Dolan's like walking by and he's like, "Hey, Dolan, sell the team." And he turns around, being the thin-skinned guy he is. He said, "You want to stay in this arena? You don't want to get kicked out? Keep your mouth shut." It was along those lines. He was basically saying, "Shut up or I'll kick you out of the arena." They weren't threatening him. They weren't saying anything danger or bad about him. This t-shirt, "Ban Dolan," or "Hey, Dolan, sell the team," which of course we all know all Knicks fans want them to do. And so this is ridiculous. This is why the Knicks, and by the way, they're a very good basketball team this year. They're going to make the playoffs more than likely. Julius Randle is without a question. He was an all-star this year, absolutely deserved it. Tom Thibodeau has surprised me. I didn't think he'd do the best job in New York. He's done an excellent job in New York. I mean, the last week they almost beat the Nets, who some people think is the best team in basketball. They almost beat the Nets. And once again, we get a reminder of why the Knicks, under this man's leadership or lack thereof, will never be a relevant franchise again. We think about this franchise, and we go back to 2019, right? Like 2019 was the craziest year of free agency I've ever seen in sports in the NBA. I mean, it was every good player was a free agent. Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, Kawhi Leonard, Klay Thompson. Kemba Walker. I got a lot of guys with K's in their first name. It was weird. But all the rumors were like, oh, KD's going to leave Golden State and go to New York. Kyrie's going to leave Boston and go to New York. And by the way, the Knicks were actually in the lottery that year and had a shot to get Zion, which, of course, that didn't work out. And I'm going to talk about Zion tomorrow, by the way. But everybody's like, KD and Kyrie, they're going to go to Madison Square Garden, right? And they're going to bring the Knicks back to relevance. They're going to be the championship picture. And we may have a shot at a Lakers-Knicks final, and both go across the street to Brooklyn. They don't want anything to do with this guy. And I don't blame him. Listen, if I were a player, man, I'm not going to New York. Unless it's like the last chance for my career, I ain't going to New York. If I could take just a little less money to go to a team that's well run and a team that is in championship contention, I'm not going to the Knicks. The fan base is great. The arena's great. Heck, I think the GM's great. The coach is really good. The owner is as bad as it gets. He has to be the most thin-skinned owner that we've seen in sports. And there are owners out there that, like, I mean, they take everything personally. But this guy's unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it, where a Ban Dolan t-shirt gets you kicked out. That got him kicked out of the arena. Not for cursing out somebody, not for ruining the experience, getting drunk and ruining the experience for other fans in the arena. A t-shirt that said Ban Dolan got him kicked out of Madison Square Garden. I believe, by the way, Max Kellerman on ESPN is like banned from Madison Square Garden because he said something to Dolan like, sell the team. Like, you got to be kidding me. Like, really, that bothers you that bad that Joe Blow says ban Dolan? Does that really get you that bad? I mean, geez, come on. Listen, I'm critical of Jerry Jones on the show. And as a GM, I have never been critical of Jerry Jones as an owner, as a businessman. I mean, the Cowboys are the most valuable sports franchise in the world, not just the country, but in the world. And you see the stadium, you see the practice facility. He's a great owner. He's just a bad general manager. James Dolan, he's as bad as it gets. I've heard people criticize Michael Jordan, who's not the greatest owner in the world. Hey, the Hornets are a solid team this year. You got, of course, unfortunately, LaMelo Ball, which sucks. He's out for the year. LaMelo Ball doesn't suck. It just sucks he's out for the year. I wasn't, saying he sucks. He does. He would have been the rookie of the year had he stayed healthy. Terry Rozier. You got the Washington kid out of Kentucky. Malik Monk is one of the best three-point shooters in basketball. Like, that's a pretty solid NBA team that Jordan has put together. Dolan's got a solid team in New York that's going to make the playoffs. And a good coach. But the man cannot get out of his own way, and he pushes free agents. That's why people don't want to go to New York. It's because they got to deal with this nonsense and this kind of distraction. The media in New York, the sports media in New York kind of has a reputation, like them, Philadelphia, Boston. Like, those are kind of the three, Los Angeles. Those are like the four most four groups of media in the city, sports media, that's hardest on its players. You already got to deal with that in New York. And then you got to deal with this clown running the show. I mean, come on. Like I said, I feel bad for Knicks fans, man. I genuinely feel bad for y'all. I don't feel bad for many sports franchises and their fans. I feel bad for Knicks fans because they got to put up with this nonsense. They got to be the most loyal fan base in sports. I mean, for real. So, man, God bless y'all. Hopefully, at some point, they can get back to relevance. And hopefully, at some point, one day, one beautiful day in New York, James Dolan sells the team and you can actually be in championship contention and put a team together, hopefully. Because you got a good general manager, solid team, really good coach, and a great fan base. Kind of helps. And by the way, the Eastern Conference is not as good as the West. You should be able to be in championship contention, through the draft, through free agency in about 2 to 3 years. But free agents don't want to go there because they got to deal with James Dolan. Simple as that. All right, that is all the time we have for today's show. Thank you guys so much for stopping by. A crazy day. We had the NBA trade deadline. We had big opinions from Charles Barkley and Draymond Green, and the Mac Jones hype is out of control, and James Dolan kicked a fan out of Madison Square Garden just for a little tiny jab. Who knows what we're going to have the show tomorrow. I know Zion. I'm going to talk about Zion Williamson and why he is destined to be one of the greatest players in the history of basketball. I'm just going to tease it now, but stop by the show tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific time, YouTube and Twitter, as always. Hope everybody has a great evening. Please continue to stay safe. God bless you all.